The hearing of the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee on Energy and Water Development will please come to order. We are here today to discuss President Biden's fiscal 2024 budget request for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the Bureau of Reclamation. I know we are all thinking of Senator Feinstein and wishing her a speedy recovery and return. And I want to thank Ranking Member Kennedy for being flexible and working with me to make this hearing happen today. I really appreciate it so that we can keep our appropriations process on track. Today's hearing marks another important step as we work to return to regular order and pass in a timely bipartisan way our funding bills to keep our families safe, our economy strong, and our nation competitive with adversaries like China. Defense spending tends to get a lot of attention, but we cannot forget that our rivers and our waterways are some of the most critical resources we have. Effective water management is essential to keeping our families healthy, our environment thriving, and our economy competitive. We use our water resources managed by the Bureau and Corps to irrigate crops that feed families across the country, to transport those crops and other goods along our rivers and out of our ports to consumers around the world, and to provide habitat for keystone species that are essential to local economies and ecosystems alike, like salmon in my home state of Washington. We even count on water and hydroelectric power to literally keep the lights on in cities across the country. So when it comes to our nation's competitiveness, this is something we can't take for granted. We have to keep our rivers and our waterways clean for wildlife and clear for transportation. We have to keep our faucets running. We have to keep our ports bustling, our farms irrigated, and our electric grid reliable. And we have to keep our communities safe and prepared for extreme weather events amid the worsening climate crisis with levees and seawalls and nature-based infrastructure to prevent flooding. The President's budget works to do that with key investments to strengthen our nation's port and waterway infrastructure, water conservation, and climate change resiliency. But the President's request is less than we provided last year for the Army Corps of Engineers and the Bureau of Reclamation. I think it's clear we have to build on the progress we are making and not slow down. So I want to see us go even bolder to make sure we are making the necessary investments to give these critical projects their due. I'm glad to see this budget does include much needed resources for projects to improve navigation through dredging our ports and maintaining waterways, support ecosystem restoration like in the Columbia River system in Washington, and protect endangered species like the fish passage at the Howard Hansen Dam, which will open up 100 miles of new habitat for our salmon. The Howard Hansen project is critical in my state, and I'm going to be watching the progress of that very closely because we have to see this work through, and there's a lot left to do. But in addition to what is outlined in President's budget, there are other critical projects Congress has already said should be a priority as well. So I want to make sure we get funding like this committee appropriated in FY23 for water infrastructure improvements for the Nation Act, programs focused on water storage, desalination, water recycling, and environmental restoration projects. I also want to hear how the Bureau is using and building on drought mitigation funding we provided in the Inflation Reduction Act. This is an issue that is only growing more urgent each year. We have experienced historic drought conditions recently, which hurt our farmers who are struggling to grow crops, threatens families and wildlife who are left at greater risk of wildfires, and undermines our economy. We need to tackle this crisis now before there is more lasting damage. Water is just too important to our families, our economy, and our nation to take for granted. We cannot afford to shortchange these projects. So I'm glad to have this opportunity to hear from our witnesses today, assess our needs, so that we can work in a bipartisan way to pass a funding bill that meets them. With that, I will turn it over to our Ranking Member Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, before I turn to our witnesses, I want to tell Senator Feinstein, if she's listening, I hope you're feeling better today and come back soon. We miss you. Thank you for being here today. America has been blessed in many ways. And sometimes I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse, and be a little bit of both. In some parts of our country, we have too much water. In other parts, we don't have enough. And in some parts of our country, it's a little mix, a little bit of both. And we depend on you and your team to manage that. And I know that's difficult. And I know every member of Congress is an expert on how you ought to do your job. I appreciate that as well. So let me begin by thanking you. One of the things I hope to achieve today is get your thoughts on how we can fine-tune the process that we use to allocate scarce resources, to do our cost-benefit analysis. Sometimes I think we don't spend enough time, our shortcoming, not yours, analyzing the benefit, that we focus too much on the cost. I'll give you an example, and I know the Secretary and the General will recognize this. We have a levee project in Louisiana called the Morganza to the Gulf Project. Now, it's not complete. It's a work in progress, but that's been completed rather thus far through a combination of state, federal, and local money. My people taxed themselves to build this levee system. In 2005, Hurricane Rita came through. Terrible, terrible storm. 9-foot storm surge. 11 to 12,000 homes of my people were damaged. It's a lot of people and a lot of homes and a lot of human misery. In 2019, after we had made progress on the Morganza to the Gulf levee system, another storm, this one Barry, came through, just as bad, same level of storm surge, same level, 9 feet. 11 homes were damaged. So we went from 11 to 12,000 homes damaged to 11 as a result of your good work. And I want to talk today about how we factor into our cost-benefit analysis that kind of good work that you have done. So thank you for being here.
All right. Thank you, Ranking Member Kennedy, and I will now introduce our panel. We have Mr. Michael Connor, who is the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works, Lieutenant General Scott Spellman, the Chief of Engineers for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and finally we have Ms. Camille Touton, who is the Commissioner of the Bureau of Reclamation. I want to thank all of you and the public servants in your agencies for their dedication to our nation's leadership in water infrastructure, water conservation, and a commitment to climate change resiliency. With that, we will proceed with our witness testimony, starting with Assistant Secretary Connor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ranking Member Kennedy, distinguished members of the subcommittee, I appreciate the opportunity to be here to discuss the President's request for the Army Civil Works program. I'll quickly summarize my written statement. The fiscal year 2024 budget request includes over $7.4 billion for the Army Civil Works program, the largest budget request in history, complemented by an additional $1.05 billion allocated from the bipartisan infrastructure law. These investments demonstrate President Biden's ongoing commitment to funding the construction of critical infrastructure projects that will strengthen our economy, protect people and property, and restore key ecosystems. I appreciate, just as a threshold matter, the robust funding levels from this subcommittee and the bipartisan support that there is for the Army Civil Works program. It's important to note that the water resource challenges of today and tomorrow are not like yesterday's. Extreme weather events, whether precipitation, drought, or hurricane-driven storm surge, are increasingly the norm, creating risk to communities, the economy, and natural systems. As a result, understanding vulnerabilities and increasing our preparedness is paramount. For that reason, the budget provides $86 million, the largest request, again, in Corps history, for research and development, over $100 million when accounting for applied R&D activities. The focus of this work will be on innovative solutions that address the emerging water resource challenges of the 21st century and achieve cost savings in the Civil Works program. The budget focuses on the highest performing work within the three main missions of the Civil Works program: commercial navigation, flood and storm damage reduction, and aquatic ecosystem restoration. In developing the budget, consideration was also given to advancing three key objectives that reflect administration priorities. First, decreasing climate risk for communities and the environment. Two, promoting environmental justice in underserved communities and tribal nations. And three, strengthening the nation's supply chains. With respect to climate, the Corps has always been in the resilience business, and the budget's proposed investments include more than $1.4 billion for construction of flood and storm damage reduction and aquatic ecosystem restoration projects. For the second priority, the budget supports the administration's Justice 40 initiative through investments in 23 studies and in the construction of 33 projects to help disadvantaged and tribal communities address their water resources challenges. Supply chains remain a priority, which Civil Works supports through its commercial navigation program. The budget facilitates safe, reliable, and sustainable commercial navigation to support U.S. competitiveness and improve the resilience of our nation's manufacturing supply chain. Overall, the budget includes over $3.4 billion for the study, design, construction, and operation maintenance of inland and coastal navigation projects. Of this amount, over $1.7 billion is derived from the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund. As alluded to earlier, flood and storm damage reduction is at the center of the Army Corps' actions to support the administration's goal of tackling the climate crisis. Accordingly, the budget contains nearly $2 billion for flood and storm damage reduction, including funding to provide technical and planning assistance to local communities to enable them to understand and better manage their flood risks. Equally important to building community resilience is the work of the Aquatic Ecosystem Restoration Mission. The budget includes $653 million for AER, including $415 million to continue progress in restoring America's Everglades while building climate resilience in South Florida. We've also included $93 million to support salmon recovery efforts in the Columbia River Basin. Other significant investments include $655 million for the construction of a critical dam safety project at Prado Dam in California, and $350 million for replacement of the Cape Cod Canal bridges. Importantly, the budget also includes $235 million to continue construction of the Sioux Locks project. In total, the FY 2024 construction program is funded at more than $2 billion. Of course, the budget also focuses on maintaining the key features of the vast water resources infrastructure that the Corps owns and manages. Specifically, the 24 budget funds the O&M program at over $4.4 billion. For the investigations program, the 2024 budget provides $139 million, including $36 million for technical and planning assistance. Wrapping up the budget summary, it's significant that the 2024 regulatory program is funded at $221 million to protect the nation's waters and wetlands and provide efficiency in permit processing, a very high priority for the administration. And the recreation program is funded at $275 million to ensure the Corps, one of the nation's leading providers of outdoor recreation, can continue to effectively serve the public's desire to experience the great outdoors. Summary, the Civil Works budget makes critical investments in water resources that will benefit the American people and promote greater prosperity and economic growth for decades to come. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. General Spellman.
Good afternoon, everyone. Chairwoman Murray and Ranking Member Kennedy and distinguished members of the subcommittee, I am honored to testify before you today and thank you for the opportunity to discuss the fiscal year 2024 budget of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, another record appropriation for our nation's Civil Works program. So today I look forward to discussing the status of important Corps projects and programs, as well as answer any questions the committee may have regarding our fiscal year 2024 budget. Most importantly, I look forward to continuing to work with this committee, the Congress, and the administration to address the nation's critical water resource infrastructure needs. We greatly appreciate the committee's continued support of the Corps program. With recent record high appropriations, including the $1.4 billion of additional funding provided late last year as part of the Disaster Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2023, the Corps' Civil Works program has experienced significant growth over the past several years. This substantial level of investment enables critical water resource projects to be studied and constructed, and it allows us to further develop innovative approaches to address some of our most pressing challenges through focused research and development. The fiscal year 2024 budget reflects a targeted approach to continue investing in our water resources programs to promote climate resiliency, which will benefit the nation's economy, environment, and public safety now and well into the future. The budget also supports the Assistant Secretary's priorities for the Corps by upgrading our nation's waterways, protecting communities and ecosystems, better serving disadvantaged communities, investing in science and research and development, and finally, sustaining and improving our communications and relationships with our many partners. The 2024 budget, taken with other recent funding, provides the Corps with what the Secretary calls a transformational opportunity to deliver water resource infrastructure projects that will positively impact communities across our great nation. We are also taking advantage of this opportunity to do two things. First, transform our organization and our decision-making processes to safely deliver quality projects on time and within budget. And secondly, to identify risks to how we are delivering our program. Our teams are hard at work seeking out new and better ways to mitigate or eliminate these risks so we can further strengthen the safety and security of communities across the country and territories. By evolving our policies, programs, and operations and placing increased focus on research and development, we are working to overcome impacts of challenges such as sea level rise, changes to precipitation patterns and hydrology, and other effects of climate change, including improvement to the resilience of Corps-owned and operated infrastructure. I will conclude by saying the Corps does not accomplish anything on its own. Delivering successful civil works project is a shared responsibility. It's a team sport. We draw from our engineering expertise and build upon our relationships with our non-federal partners, our project stakeholders, and Congress to enable us to succeed. I look forward to continuing our great collaboration as we continue to pursue our vision, engineering solutions for our nation's toughest challenges. So thank you, Chairwoman Murray, Ranking Member Kennedy, and members of the committee. Again, I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you. And Commissioner Tootin.
Good afternoon. My name is Camille Klim-Lim Tootin, and I'm the Commissioner of the Bureau of Reclamation. Thank you, Chair Murray, Ranking Member Kennedy, and members of the subcommittee for the opportunity to discuss the President's budget for the Bureau of Reclamation. And thank you, Chair Feinstein, for her continued leadership on Western Water. The Bureau of Reclamation is the largest supplier of manager of water in the nation and the second largest producer of hydropower. Reclamation's mission supports $66.5 billion in economic activity and 472,000 jobs. Meeting our mission means addressing drought resilience, water security, climate change adaptation, ecosystem health, and issues of equity. The need to secure, maintain, and modernize our nation's infrastructure is an administration priority. And we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to utilize our fiscal year 24 $1.4 billion budget request with that of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. The issues we face today are unprecedented as we experience the worst drought in the 120-year history of this organization. Record snowfall and rain across parts of the West this year, and particularly in California, have brought some relief, but are not a resolution to our years, if not decades-long drought. Snowpack is at 164% of average in the Colorado River Basin, but the reservoirs are collectively at 30%. In California's Central Valley, we experienced the 3 driest consecutive years on record, only to be followed with 9 atmospheric rivers in late December and January. The cyclical nature of Western hydrology highlights the need for immediate actions as well as thoughtful planning and on-the-ground work to make both our infrastructure and our operational decisions more resilient to withstand future water resource variability. Reclamation's 24 budget priorities reflect a commitment to drought planning and response activities to promote water security. And this budget acknowledges the need to continue to develop and deploy science-based drought and climate change adaptation strategies. Reclamation's Water Smart and Science and Technology programs directly contribute to these administration priorities, including $22.5 million for R&D, science, and tech. We must also plan for our infrastructure. Our dams and reservoirs, water conveyance systems, and power generation facilities serve as the water and power infrastructure backbone of the American West. However, as with all infrastructure, these features are aging and in need of critical maintenance. Our 24 budget includes $105.3 million for extraordinary maintenance, combined with our bill investments of $825 million in 22 and 23. And that includes our aging infrastructure announcement of $585 million earlier this month. We are constructing our largest dam safety modification project at BF Dam in California, supported by our 24 budget request of $210 million for dam safety, which includes $182.6 million for the implementation of dam safety modification actions. This funding not only addresses BFSIS Dam, but also El Vado in New Mexico and 10 additional projects in the West, in Washington, Oregon, Montana, and North Dakota. We are able to leverage this funding to more effectively address West-wide needs in an accelerated manner due to the $500 million in bill funding. We must also address our infrastructure need and consider economic inequities in the needs of rural and underserved communities. Reclamation is establishing and rebuilding water infrastructure for underserved populations by ensuring that clean drinking water is provided to our communities through our rural water investments. Our 24 budget request includes $57.8 million, and as with our dam safety and aging infrastructure programs, our rural water program leverages the $1 billion in bill funding to accelerate completion of these long-needed projects, of which we've allocated $698 million. Our budget also includes $35.5 million for Reclamation's Native American Affairs program to enhance our technical assistance to tribes. And lastly, Reclamation's budget request supports the administrative legislative proposals for Indian water rights settlement implementation efforts. Reclamation will continue to manage the drought in real time and plan for the future, with a focus on people, partnerships, and investments. And Reclamation is committed to working with Congress and our partners and stakeholders in carrying out our mission, and our fiscal year 2024 budget supports these actions. I again thank the subcommittee. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. We will now begin our round of 5-minute questions, and I ask my colleagues to keep track of the clock. Commissioner Tootin, I want to start with you. Last Congress, as you know, we passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which included $4 billion in funding for reclamation to address declining water levels because of the drought, primarily, of course, in the Colorado River Basin. We're all thankful, of course, this year for much-needed rain and snow, and as you and I've talked about, one wet season does not counter the driest 23-year period ever recorded in that basin. We do need long-term solutions to effectively manage that water and adjust for the impacts of climate change. Can you explain how the supplemental environmental impact statement that was released earlier this month fits into those efforts and highlight other steps that you are taking to increase our water security and resilience?
Thank you for that question, Madam Chair. With regard to the Colorado River Basin and the Inflation Reduction Act, within 60 days of the President signing the Inflation Reduction Act into law, we had a request for proposals for what we call short-term bridging water. And we're happy to announce as part of that last month, it's actually still this month, we announced 125,000 acre-feet commitment by the Gila River Indian community, which amounts to about $50 million. What that means in Lake Mead is about 2 feet of elevation in the short term. We've also committed $250 million for the Salton Sea, because impacts as far as to the sea result at the sea as a result of conservation efforts and less water into the system. And we've also stood up $125 million for a system conservation program in the Upper Basin. As it relates to the supplemental EIS that we released earlier this month, as the efforts that we have, whether in short-term bridging water and our long-term investments in sustainable infrastructure, help to keep water levels higher in Mead. And our ability to keep levels high so that we can continue to operate, whether that's through voluntary measures or investments in infrastructure, help with the process and coming to a consensus solution in the basin. And we're committed to that. So thank you for your support.
Thank you. As you know, the Columbia River Basin provides significant habitat for salmon and other endangered species. It irrigates 600,000 acres of farmland. It serves as a water highway and provides electricity to the majority of the region. I wanted to ask Commissioner Tootin and Assistant Secretary Connor, I know your teams have been working diligently to reach a new agreement with Canada on the Columbia River Treaty. As those negotiations continue, would you commit to keeping me updated on the progress of that and let us know if there's anything we can do to assist your efforts? Commissioner,
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. A modernized treaty is incredibly important. We will keep you informed. I'm committed to that.
Yes.
As well, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. This is so important. We've got to stay apprised of this progress, and it needs to, we need to keep moving on this, so I appreciate that. Assistant Secretary Connor, I consistently hear from our ports and harbors across the country about the importance of the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund. And that is exactly why I reached across the aisle to unlock some additional trust fund dollars for some of our critical harbor work. I worked with the donor ports like Seattle and Tacoma to provide targets for distributing those trust fund dollars. That funding is really key to ensuring high-quality port infrastructure and maintaining our national competitiveness. But the budget this year does not appear to meet all the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund targets. What steps are you taking to make sure the targets are met?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will just say I appreciate our conversation on this very subject about a month ago. We did not include the 12% set aside for energy and donor ports. And I appreciate the sensitivity of the dialogue that you engaged in and the statutory provision that was included that reflects the balance that Congress feels is important. So I'm committed now to ensuring as we move forward, you know, the threshold issue is our priority has always been to maintain authorized channels at their authorized depths and widths. And that's going to be an ongoing effort as priority one. But understanding the balance that Congress has sought through those provisions in WRDA, I'm committed to ensuring that in the next budget cycle we are looking, and I think this will help in the next work plan cycle, that we identify the donor ports and the energy supporting ports, that we identify what are those expanded uses that they anticipate, that they've identified as needs, so that we have that roster, that inventory of needs. And I'm committed to doing that and issuing guidance to ensure that we have that information available for the next decision-making process.
Well, as you know, I'm going to be watching that very closely. All right, thank you. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could you put that up for me right quick?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. General, I know you can't see that, but it's a page from your website, and let me read you the relevant sentence. It says the Mississippi River and Tributaries Project, which of course is how we pay for flood control and levees. The Mississippi River and Tributaries Project has prevented more than $1.5 trillion, not billion, trillion, in flood damages since 1928, or $95 for every $1 invested. This is from your website. How was this compiled, that data compiled, General?
Yes, sir. So it's simply taking the cost of the project and comparing it to the benefits that you're describing. Structure saved, acres preserved, recreation opportunities. So it's a comparison between the simple math between the cost and benefits.
So you have the ability at the Corps, your economists and others, to calculate losses, potential losses.
Yes, sir, we do.
And what this is telling me is that without the Corps of Engineers work, funded as I described, with respect to levees and flood control, the American people would have sustained damages of $1.5 trillion. Is that right?
Yes, sir, I believe that's correct.
Okay. Here's what I'm getting at, General. If you have this ability, and I believe you do, I'm not suggesting that this isn't accurate. I'm very grateful that this is accurate, and I'm very grateful to the Corps. But if your folks have this ability to put a value on the potential losses that we are averting, why doesn't that play a bigger role in your cost-benefit analysis when you're looking at the feasibility of a project?
Yes, sir. So this is clearly is a great question. Clearly something the Corps has to get better on in comprehensive benefits. So I'll just give you two areas, sir, where we are trying to improve. We have a number of flood risk management projects and navigation projects that have a national security implication. We're working on one in North Dakota in Minot. You could use the Sioux locks as an example. The Port of Nome in Alaska, it's a remote and subsistence harbor, but the Coast Guard and Navy can use that. So we're challenged on those type of projects to quantify the national security benefit. We have flood risk management projects today in Selma, Alabama, or in Princeville, North Carolina, that preserve cultural and historic properties, and we struggle to put a monetary value on that. But it's something with the Secretary's leadership, sir, we absolutely get it. It's something we have to improve upon.
Well, General, I misspoke. I said 1.5 trillion. The real figure is 2.7 trillion, which your work has prevented. $2.7 trillion in damages. And your economists, you stand by that number, I assume.
Yes, sir.
And your economists have a way to come up with that number.
That's correct.
It just makes no sense to me if we can quantify the losses that would be prevented by building a flood control project, that we wouldn't make that one of the determining factors in the cost-benefit analysis. I mean, I gave you the statistic. The Morganza of the Gulf levee system prevented damage, flooding, to 12,000 homes. And you can quantify that. Don't you think we ought to change the formula a little bit?
Well, so the way you're describing a loss prevented is a benefit of these projects. The Morganza example, I would argue, sir, we have many of those. We have many Morganzas across the country that we have to get better on in resourcing. Yes,
I'm going to ask you one quick question the time I have left. The price of the Comet River Diversion Canal has gone up $500 million. How? I know inflation, but wow.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
What are we going to do about that?
Sir, you've got inflation down. The thing that we're taking on, this is a great example where we have to get better at communicating to the committees and to Congress and administration the cost estimates that we give you in a chief's report in paragraph 11. And we give you a number with some decimal points on it for a project that may be constructed down the road, but what we don't give you is the percent design that cost estimate is based on. So in a 3x3 study, a district might get to a 10% level design, or a 4-year study, they might get to 25%. And then as that design is mature, like it is now today in COMET, you're finding that there are additional requirements that we get as we get deeper into the geotech and to the sizing of some of these structures. That's what we're experiencing here, and it's something we've got to get better on in communicating to you and others.
How do we get that number? We got a hell of a mess here, General. Okay, my people expected this to be done. We brought it in on time. I mean, and then all of a sudden, bam, $500 million. How are we going to get this price down?
Sir, you have our commitment that we're going to work through this. We're committed to finishing this. I don't have all the answers here today. I can share my commitment that we will get this done.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Heinrich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Tootin, I want to ask you about how you're balancing the drought relief efforts across the West. And I think it's clear that as reservoir levels in the Colorado Basin have dropped, it's really captured the attention of the country. But for the Colorado Basin, there are many other basins in the West that are experiencing the same dynamic, right? We are just dealing with less precipitation, less snowpack, less water in these systems than we were 50 years ago. Yes. And that's not drought because it's not temporary. It is aridification. Mm-hmm. It is the result of climate change, and it is going to be at that level or potentially worse for the foreseeable future. So how do we make sure that how are you making sure that you're addressing that issue across basins in places like the Rio Grande that have equally stressing situations in their systems right now?
Thank you for that question, Senator. What you have outlined is exactly what we're not only are we seeing in the Colorado River Basin, but across the West. Our facilities were built with the notion that our largest reservoir would be snowpack, that it would fall, that it would stay there and not melt early, and then when it would melt, it would end up in our rivers and therefore our reservoirs. That is not what we're seeing for the most part. It's drier, snow is falling at higher elevations, and when it does melt, it's sooner, and the grounds are dry. Take into account what you saw in your home state last year with the Rio Grande. For the first time in 40 years, parts of the Rio Grande ran dry. So what are we doing about it? First, we're maximizing the efforts that we have in the short and long term, both in our budget request, but with investments in the bipartisan infrastructure law, with water smart efficiencies and lining of canals, being more efficient about our water use. But we're also looking at it from a long-term perspective. You and I have talked about that that's not necessarily the solution for every place, and that our ability to recharge our aquifers also means that we have an ability to make sure our streams are available. So part of our announcements that we made as well is a NOFO, a Notice of Funding for Aquatic Ecosystem Restoration. So our ability to look at these holistically, and these are short-term tools, but then we're investing in the infrastructure. We're really proud of our aging infrastructure investments. We had, as part of that, in $30 million for the Rio Grande for aging infrastructure. And we are looking at the Inflation Reduction Act. It says $4 billion for the Colorado River and basins of comparable levels of drought. So as we're working through the Colorado River, we're working on a lot of things, including that provision on how we can utilize that for long-term projects.
Assistant Secretary Connor, I want to ask you, you're super familiar with the infrastructure in the Rio Grande Basin with your background, but when we authorized all of that infrastructure, and I suspect this is true across many basins in the West, you kind of had a one-off approach. You might have one reservoir that was for flood control. You had a different reservoir that was for storage. And as we come under more and more pressure and there's less and less water in the system as a whole, we really need to be able to manage the basin as a whole, coordinating all those pieces of infrastructure. And last year, the Corps was directed to work with the National Academies to study reservoir management and operational issues within the Rio Grande Basin so that we could come up potentially with a more comprehensive management strategy. How is that progressing?
It's progressing in pieces rather than that holistic approach that you've described, Senator. And I absolutely agree. And I think this builds upon the commissioner's point. We don't have the luxury anymore of having single-purpose projects doing individual things. So we've got to tie this together, and that requires the Bureau working with the Corps of Engineers and vice versa, so that we can make our current infrastructure work harder, that we have better science and understanding of the system, that we ensure when we're doing flood control that we no longer just channeling water away where it can't be used. We need to incidentally restore groundwater for environmental benefits, and we have to look if we can't pick off water to specifically incorporate that in managed aquifer recharge. And so I get back to your fundamental question. We've got authorities for studies, the Upper Rio Grande Water Operations Manual. We're proceeding to continue to refine that based on new authorities. Now we can use ABAQ for water storage as well as flood control purposes. We're storing water from El Vado under a deviation now because that's undergoing a safety of dam project. We just need, I think, to think about an overarching study or approach that ensures we're integrating. In the meantime, we're going to cobble these things together and talk to each other and figure out these multi-benefit approaches we can move forward with the current infrastructure system.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for convening this meeting, and thank you guys for being here and your willingness to serve as well. I want to talk about the Yazoo Backwater levee enlargement, specifically the need to enlarge the existing Yazoo Backwater levee. Often when people hear Yazoo Backwater Project, they immediately assume we're talking about the unconstructed pumping station, which is a very important issue that must be resolved, but the pumps are just one part of the comprehensive Yazoo Backwater area project. Authorized features include levees, floodgates, drainage channels, and the pumping stations. But the Yazoo Backwater levee was completed in 1978. It is essentially an extension of the mainline Mississippi River East Bank levee, and it runs along the west bank of the Yazoo River. This levee system, along with the Still Bayou floodgates, serves as a first line of defense of the nearly 2,000 square miles Yazoo Backwater area when the Mississippi River is high and backs up into the Yazoo River. When the river's high and the area receives above average rainfall, interior water is trapped inside the levee system almost like a bathtub, and we have a destructive backwater flood. As we've seen time and time again, like the catastrophic flood of 2019 and many others since 2008, until a pumping station is constructed and operational in the Yazoo Backwater area, we have to ensure the structures we have in place are as strong as possible. And during that historic flood in the Mississippi River in 2011, the historic backwater levee came within inches of overtopping. If that happened, the area would have been inundated with more than 16 feet of water. Let me repeat that. The area would have had more than 16 feet of water. From the beginning, the Corps has said the Yazoo Backwater levee would need to be raised at some point during the 50-year project life and the recommended plan. But unfortunately, the President's fiscal year budget in 2024 does not include any funding to enlarge the Yazoo Backwater levee. But $2 million could be used for that purpose, according to the Corps' FY24 total capability estimate. Secretary Connor or Lieutenant General Spellman, either one, please explain to the subcommittee the magnitude of the flooding that would occur should the Yazoo Backwater levee ever overtop.
Yes, ma'am, I'll start. So you're correct that we became within 2 inches of this occurring in the 2011 event. This would be major flooding. So you have to assume in these conditions that the Steel Bayou structure is closed and the Yazoo River is high. And so you have the condition where the precipitation is gathering behind the structure in those communities, in addition to water coming over top of the levee. And that, as you described in 2019, those conditions in the current arrangement could last for months.
Okay, and I've submitted a FY24 funding request to enlarge the Yazoo Backwater levee. Please explain to the subcommittee that the Yazoo Backwater levee is a separate, completed feature of the Yazoo Backwater project, and said funds would indeed be used to enlarge the levee, which has nothing to do with the construction of the pumps.
Yes, ma'am. The levee enlargement is a separate feature of the system, and we would use the money provided to begin the design of that levee enlargement.
Okay, in other words, comparing funding to enlarge the levee to funding to construct the pumps is like comparing apples and oranges. They are completely different project elements. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, ma'am. They are different project features.
And do you agree the Yazoo Backwater levee needs to be enlarged?
Ma'am, today it's just under 6 feet below its designed height, and so this next enlargement would take it up another 2 feet, consistent with the MR&T system. That's the next planned levee raise for this system. But yes, I agree.
Great. Thank you so much. My time is almost out. I'll yield.
Senator Hoeven.
Thanks, Madam Chairman. Commissioner Tootin, thanks for coming to North Dakota. Appreciate it very much. You reviewed the Eastern North Dakota water supply project. It's very important that Reclamation help us with funding that project. Are you willing to continue to work to help us fund that project?
It was great to see it with you. North Dakota is beautiful in the summer, and I look forward to working with you on that project.
Well, you're invited again, and it was great to have you out there. One more technical question is the funding to comply with the Boundary Waters Treaty for biota treatment is being taken out of Section 7 instead of out of Section 1, which is taking away some of the ongoing funding in Section 7. Are you willing to work with us on that and see if we can't get that addressed?
Our teams are working already on that, Senator, and I'm happy to report back and continue to work on that issue.
Thank you, and I want to note and thank your responsiveness. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Happy to do that.
Secretary Connor, Dakota Access Pipeline, with which you are very familiar, moving more than 500,000 barrels a day of energy, the lightest, sweetest crude from North Dakota that our nation badly needs right now. Please, status update on getting the EIS process completed. As you know, it's been operating safely now for years, and what do you anticipate for completion of the EIS process?
Absolutely. I'll provide an update, Senator. So, as a result, as you know, but just for the record, in 2000, the Corps was ordered to go back and do a full EIS. So Right now, we are at the stage where we have produced an administrative draft EIS, shared that with cooperating partners such as the state of North Dakota, and also we went ahead and shared that with all the tribes who have registered interest. So we've got about 6 cooperating agencies as well as 30 tribes now who have reviewed it, provide us comments. We are currently taking into account, incorporating those comments, having some additional technical discussions with the goal of coming out with a draft environmental impact statement for public review by the end of June. So it's a little shift from the schedule that you and I have previously talked about, and it was because of the request for an additional review period of the administrative draft EIS. So we will put it out for review, probably 45 or 60 days. I anticipate we'll get additional requests for time. We're prepared to go out a little longer than that, but my conversations with you and the governor, I know we need to get our work done here and do the full analysis, and we've tried to incorporate a better assessment of spill risk, spill response, tribal trust interests so that we could fully evaluate potential impacts, as well as disclosing just the overall greenhouse gas emissions and social costs of carbon parties of the administration. So we've now done that. We're taking comments. We'll get it out end of June and hopefully move forward to get to a final EIS.
And you understand the importance of the project and getting the EIS completed?
I absolutely understand.
Thank you,
Senator.
Thank you, Secretary. General, you're looking forward to your visit to the Fargo-Moorhead region next month, and your meeting out there. And I want to thank you for having your meeting, your core nationwide meeting out there for 3 days next month. This is an incredible project, and frankly, do you consider this, the Red River Valley Flood Protection Project, really a national model, and are you committed to completing it and getting it done on time and as planned?
Yes, sir, absolutely committed completing this project. I don't often get to report on schedule within budget, but this was our project delivery team of the year. So we're going to take all 42 district commanders and our 13 general officers out there to see how they did it. But looking forward to this visit, sir.
Thank you. And in the case, you mentioned Minot earlier, your continued creativity is going to be needed in Minot. You've shown that working with the Minot Air Force Base, the only dual nuclear base in the nation, so it truly is a national security issue. But also for completing the flood protection, particularly for the lower income areas, with some of those back channels and some of those kind of things, you have some programs that we're going to need to use as well. Your people in the region have identified them. And so strong support for some of the ideas the region's bringing forward from your office would be very helpful in completing that comprehensive flood control project.
Yes, sir. We certainly want to get after resourcing some of the innovation that the district has come up with in some of these communities that you're describing.
And you're committed to supporting it?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Brett.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you all for being here today. We certainly appreciate your time and your willingness to be in front of this committee. We know that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is responsible for the design, construction, and maintenance of both military construction and civil works projects across our great nation. I appreciate your consistent commitment to construction projects at military installations, including those at Fort Novosel, outside my hometown of Enterprise, Alabama. Secretary Connor, thank you for visiting the Port of Mobile last week. I know that the port and the Mobile District welcomed the opportunity to show you around. In 2019, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers approved what was called the General Reevaluation Report, examining the cost and benefits and the environmental impacts of deepening and widening the Mobile Bay Ship Channel to accommodate larger vessels and allow two-way traffic. In June of 2020, the U.S. Army Corps and the Alabama State Port Authority signed a project partnership agreement, and the FY 2020 U.S. Army Corps work plan fully funded the channel deepening and widening project. In September of 2020, the Mobile District of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers awarded the first of now 7 phases of construction for this project. As of today, Phase 1 and Phase 3 of the project is complete. Phase 4 of the project is scheduled for completion in June of 2024, while the remaining 4 phases are scheduled to be done concurrently starting later this year. The full project is scheduled to be completed by March 2025. The deepening and widening of the Mobile Ship Channel will bring unprecedented economic growth to the entire state of Alabama and to the communities surrounding the Mobile Bay. Once deepened, the public and private terminals of the Port of Mobile will be able to accommodate larger ships and more frequent scheduling, handling a wide range of cargo, including mined materials, manufactured goods, bulk cargo, containerized cargo, and agribusiness cargo. Mr. Secretary, from your standpoint, is the project to deepen and widen the Mobile Ship Channel on schedule for completion by March of 2025?
Senator, yes, the project is still on schedule. Can I just say, fantastic facility, fantastic tour last week, pretty impressive, the capabilities there, and the diversification in the port as far as the cargo that it brings in and out. I know there is an issue with utility easements that we're working through with Phase 4, and that's the other thing I just wanted to mention. I think it's a great levels of communication with the port as well with state officials, all helping to work through those utility issues. So I think we need to keep up attention on that to be able to get to ensure that we get the construction activity done. But everything that I learned last week is we're still on progress.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your compliments to the great work that's done there. There have been many men and women who've been very intentional about how we could grow and how we could make sure that it was benefiting a multitude of people and places and servicing that community and the surrounding state. So thank you so much for saying that. And I know that all parties are committed to working through any necessary paperwork, anything that needs to be done to make sure that we stay on time and we meet that March 2025 deadline. The Port of Mobile is expected to receive $5.4 million in FY23 in the work plan for the Port Energy Funds. Port Energy Funds are funds provided to ports across the nation at which energy commodities comprise more than 25% of the tonnage moved through the port. This year, it is my understanding that the U.S. Army Corps has revised guidance for the use of port energy funds, such that if a port is receiving these funds and they wishes to them for dredging material and management activities, it is either not allowed or requires the U.S. Army Corps headquarters to sign off. This is different from past practices. In past MOUs, the Port of Mobile has been able to use the port energy funds for berth dredging and surveying, post-dredging, hauling, berth dredged materials, and off-site upland sites requiring testing of these materials and just a wide variety of things. I believe that the U.S. Army Corps should maintain its past practices of allowing energy ports like the Port of Mobile to be able to use their port energy funds to dredge and engage in dredge material management activities, and that this new guidance is overly restrictive to operations and maintenance of the Port of Mobile. Mr. Secretary, will you commit to reviewing this new guidance and ensuring that the port energy funds can be used for both dredging and for dredged material management activities?
I will absolutely commit.
Before you get the answer to that question, Senator Britt, I have to go to another committee hearing. Senator Murkowski's on her way. I know this, you'll not say no, but would you mind holding the gavel until Senator Murkowski gets here?
I would be honored. Thank you
very much.
Thank you, Madam
I'll
Chairman.
turn that over to you until she gets here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is the first time, number 99 out of 100. It's going to be, it's going to take quite some time before I get to do something like that again. Thank you.
Senator, I'll just say I was a staff person in the Senate when I think Barack Obama was 99.
Okay, well, there you go.
I'm absolutely committed to relooking at that guidance. I think there's two questions. The beneficial use of dredge material and dredge material management, is that within the definition of expanded uses under the statute? And then I think my predecessor, we might have some guidance out there that might be causing the issue. So I will go back and look at that, because quite frankly, one of the most impressive aspects of last week's tour was and General Spellman gets all the credit for setting a high goal for beneficially using dredged material.
Yes.
And that has a lot of advantages and environmental benefits. And I saw a lot of that last week. We want to incentivize that. We don't want to minimize that. So I will go back and look at that guidance.
No, and we're really proud. That's something that we've tried to do. And I'm sure you saw it there with the creation of the island and creating the ecosystems, allowing thousands of birds to nest, and including the brown pelican there that was removed from the federal endangered species list in 2009. So certainly want to make sure that we're being responsible. And so I appreciate you leaning into that as well. And on that note, I'm going to raise this issue. I know that permitting approvals do take time, and that you and your staff continue to work with the Port of Mobile just to make sure that we're doing what we need to do to get this done on time and meeting the needs of the community.
Ma'am, I'll just say we completely acknowledge the space requirements there. So this is a 1,200-acre beneficial use site. We are working with EPA and the port on the permitting requirements. Ma'am, I don't see any issues. We'll get this done.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll tell you what, that concludes my questions. General, while we're waiting, and I'm not used to even getting through a portion of my questions, so this is, who knew? But would love to talk to you. I know that y'all are responsible not only for civil works, but military construction, as we mentioned earlier. Can you share with the committee any challenges that you're having in this space, anything that you believe that needs to be brought to our attention?
Ma'am, I take the number one challenge and the number one opportunity that we have in the Corps of Engineers today is our workload. If you go back to the early 90s through 2000, we had about a $15 billion program that was across civil works, military construction, and all the other government agencies that we do work for. And today it's not 15 billion. If you add that all up, it's about 92 billion. Wow. And we largely have the same size workforce, slightly larger. Last year we hired 5,000 new engineers onto our team, and we lost 4,000 to retirements and transfers. So it's certainly a number one challenge, but it's also an opportunity in that we're looking for more innovative ways to get after our projects, working more with industry, working more with architect engineer firms in our designs, and we're having to break a little bit of internal culture but I think it's all healthy.
Yes, Mr. Secretary, thank you.
If I could just add on to that, I think, in addition to the issues and the workload and the ways the organization is trying to adjust in using our assets across the entire enterprise, those are incredibly important. I think also one of the challenges that we face is not just the magnitude of the costs and cost increases and the personnel to carry out the work, but quite frankly, we have some very well-intended rules that we operate under with respect to fully funding projects or investigations such as through the bipartisan infrastructure law, such as BBA 2018. And quite frankly, we've had significant cost increases, not just in construction activity, but even in the investigations as the work gets more complex. So I think some flexibility or just recognition, and Congress has already done this. We had some restrictions of having to finish projects with BBA 2018 funding. We got some relief in the last omnibus appropriations bill. So we were able to supplement those BBA 2018 funds with additional resources from the bipartisan infrastructure law and move forward with a critical project on California's shoreline. So I would just say I think that's a dialogue that we need to continue to have with the professional staff and with senators about where we're not able to complete work, which just gets us high-centered, and that's in nobody's best interest, whether it's investigations or construction activity.
Absolutely. And General, can I dig down? So you've had 4,000 people retire?
No, ma'am, it was an arrangement of retirements, folks transferring to private construction work, folks going to work for other federal agencies. So a large transition over the past year and a half in our workforce.
And so what all does the plan entail to recruit and to kind of fill that gap?
Yes, ma'am. So we have really energized not only our recruiting campaign. I mean, we were advertising in Times Square here just a few months ago, and but also our retention campaigns. And within the, I mean, this is a unique agency within the federal government. Seldom are two of our projects alike. They're very, very complicated, and that's what we sell when we recruit. This is rewarding work that we're doing on behalf of the nation.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you.
Can I just say I'm attending an infrastructure task force meeting later on after this hearing, and so I was just getting the readout on some of these statistics with respect to engineers in particular. So I think we anticipate, based on the levels of resources we have normally and even increasing, that we would, have an 8% increase on the number of engineers that we need. And I think even anticipating that, the statistic that I was just given earlier today was that we're still going to be something across not just government but the private sector, something like 40,000 engineers short of where we need to be to carry out the anticipated level of infrastructure design, construction activity over the next several years. And we're graduating less engineers, and so we're losing ground in that way. So in addition to hiring, and I think we're competing well, it's the retirements and the exit that a lot of folks are making. We need to somehow get the younger generation more interested, more willing to enter into the engineering field and profession because we need them.
Yes, absolutely. We'll do a little recruitment tool then. I'm telling people we need more engineers, and certainly what an incredible way to serve our country. So, you mentioned Selma earlier in your remarks. Can you tell me a little bit about what is going on there and what the plans are?
Yes, ma'am. The good news is we're fully funded for preliminary engineering and design, and we'll have our designs complete in October of this year. And we'll use that design, ma'am, to fully inform what our first size of the first construction contract. I've had the opportunity to visit this project. Everybody on this project delivery team is excited about this work ahead. The next task is to, as I said, is to wrap up the designs, and then we look forward to moving out on construction.
Excellent. As you know, Selma is not only an important place in Alabama, but obviously a historical marker for our nation. And so certainly appreciate your attention to that project. And you also have responsibilities to manage recreational areas. Am I right in saying that?
Yes, ma'am. Hundreds of them across the country.
Yes. So tell me, I know a lot of those are subject to damage and other things. Can you share with the committee how you prioritize those fundings kind of across your business line, particularly within that area?
Yes, ma'am. But a very challenging mission, and we have some great Rangers in the Army Corps of Engineers that get a lot of mileage out of the dollars that we appropriate, we give them. And certainly, it's just always very, very competitive. When I give my recommendations to the Secretary every fall for the next year's budget, life safety always goes to the top, and then we have legal mandates, national security requirements, and then we get into our economic and environmental returns, and we certainly always want to finish what we start. And that's very, very challenging for our recreation sites. We do the best we can. We try to get the maximum use out of every dollar that we are given. It is challenging, but the public, the amount of public that comes out to our recreation sites along the water just seems to grow every year, and it's a program that we're extremely proud of.
Excellent. Well, I think this was part of being new. I think this was a test to see if I could finish this out. I wanted to thank you all for coming today. This will end our hearing. I'd like to thank the witnesses and my colleagues for participating in today's hearing. I look forward to working together on this year's appropriations bill to ensure that we are providing the Army Corps and the Bureau the resources that they need. I will keep the hearing record open for 1 week. Committee members who would like to submit written questions for the record should do so by 5 p.m. Wednesday, May 3rd. We appreciate the Army Corps and the Bureau responding to them in a reasonable time period. We stand adjourned. Thank you.